The market was crowded with noise, full of strange smells of cooked meat and burning oils. Alien merchants shouted to sell their goods, children ran through the dust, and guards stood tall with weapons in hand. In the middle of all this, there was one spot where the crowd grew louder. People gathered in a circle, laughing and pointing. At the center of the circle, a young alien girl was on her knees. Her clothes were dirty, torn, and her long hair hung in knots over her face. In front of her, food was scattered on the ground, pieces of fruit and bread dropped into the dust like trash. Her master stood above her, tall and cruel, with a whip in his hand. His voice was sharp. "Eat," he ordered. "Eat like the animal you are." The girl looked at the ground, shame burning in her eyes. She shook her head slowly, refusing. The crowd roared with laughter. Some threw more food to the ground, kicking it closer to her. "Look at her," one of them mocked. "Even beasts eat better than this." Her stomach twisted with hunger. It had been days since she had real food. Her thin hands trembled, but still she refused to lower her face to the dirt. Her master's eyes darkened. He cracked the whip in the air, and the sound cut through the noise of the market. The crowd stepped back, but no one moved to help her. They only wanted to watch. The girl's lips pressed together. She whispered something too soft for anyone to hear. Her body shivered, but her eyes stayed hard. She would rather starve than obey this command. For her, this was not only about food, it was about dignity, about not being broken completely. Then something strange happened. Through the crowd, a man walked. He was not like the others. His skin was different, his build smaller but strong. He was human. Dust clung to his boots as he pushed his way through the circle. His eyes fell on the girl, then on the food in the dirt. The crowd went silent for a moment, shocked that a human dared to step forward. Whispers spread fast. "What is he doing here?" someone muttered. "Humans don't interfere. They value their lives." But this man did not stop. His jaw tightened as he saw the whip in the master's hand and the bruises on the girl's skin. Something inside him stirred, anger, pity, and a kind of fire that refused to stay hidden. He had seen cruelty before, but this was different. This was too much. The master noticed him and sneered. "Go back, human. This is no business of yours." Still, the man walked closer. His steps were slow but firm, each one making the crowd step back. He reached the girl, who was still kneeling on the ground, her hands clenched into fists. She raised her eyes and saw him. For a second, confusion showed on her face. Why was he here? Why was a human, a stranger, looking at her like she mattered? The man crouched down. He did not say anything at first. His hand reached to her shoulder, brushing off the dust. She flinched at the touch, but his eyes told her he meant no harm. Slowly, he lifted her chin so she would look at him. Her eyes were wet, full of shame and hunger. Behind them, the master's voice thundered. "Stand back, human, or you'll take her place." The whip cracked again, closer this time. The crowd gasped. They expected the man to retreat, to bow his head and step away like all humans did when faced with alien authority. But he didn't. Instead, he reached down, picked up the piece of bread lying in the dirt, and brushed it clean with his hand. Then he placed it in the girl's hand gently, not forcing her, not commanding her, offering it. She stared at the bread, then at him. Her lips parted as if to speak, but no sound came out. The master's face twisted with rage. He raised the whip high, ready to strike the human. The crowd leaned forward, eager to see blood. But the human stood. He turned his body to face the master, placing himself between the girl and the whip. His voice was calm, but strong. No one should eat like this. Not her. Not anyone. The market froze. It was as if the entire world had stopped breathing. No human had ever spoken like that here. No human had ever dared to stand in the way. The girl's heart pounded. She wanted to tell him to leave, to run before the master killed him. She whispered, her voice shaking, "Don't, you'll die." But he did not move. His feet were firm on the ground. His eyes locked on the master's. The whip trembled in the master's grip. For the first time, he saw not weakness in the human's eyes, but defiance. The kind of defiance that spread like fire. The crowd, which had been laughing only moments ago, now watched in silence. Some even looked uncertain, as if a seed of doubt had been planted in their hearts. The human did not attack, but his presence was like a wall. He bent once more, helping the girl to her feet. She swayed, weak from hunger, but his arm steadied her. Her cheek brushed against his shoulder, and for the first time in years, she felt safe. even in the middle of the enemy's market. The master growled, stepping closer. The whip raised high again, but the human did not flinch. The crowd leaned in, waiting for the strike, waiting for blood, waiting to see if this human truly had the courage to stand against alien law. And in that tense moment, everything seemed to stop. The laughter, the shouts, even the wind. Only the sound of the whip cutting the air remained, and the question hung heavy in the silence. Would he survive defying them, or was this the last choice he would ever make? The human's hand was still on the alien girl's shoulder when the whip cracked again in the air. The sound was sharp like lightning, and the crowd gasped. The master's eyes burned with anger. He stepped forward, towering above the human. His voice was full of poison. You dare to touch what belongs to me? You dare stand against the law? The human did not move back. His face was calm, but his heart was beating fast inside his chest. He could feel the weight of every eye in the market watching him. The girl trembled beside him, whispering so only he could hear. Please don't. If you fight him, you'll be killed. They don't care about humans. But the man's eyes never left the master. No one belongs to you, he said quietly, his words steady like stone. The master's nostrils flared. The crowd erupted with mixed voices. Some laughed, some shouted for punishment, some whispered in disbelief. The master's hand tightened around the whip. You are nothing but a weak human. Do you want to die for this broken thing? She is dirt. She is mine. The girl's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to shout at him to stop, to bow, to save himself. She had seen too many die for less. But the human crouched again, ignoring the insults, and lifted her chin so she would not look at the ground anymore. His voice was soft, almost gentle. Stand. You are not dirt. Her eyes widened. No one had ever said those words to her. Not in her whole life. Something inside her chest broke open, a feeling she could not name, a tiny spark of hope she thought was long dead. But the moment did not last. The master's whip lashed forward. The human twisted his arm just in time, and the whip cut across his sleeve instead of his face. The sharp sting burned his skin, but he did not cry out. He stood firm, his body between the girl and the master. The crowd roared louder now, my excitement mixing with fear. Kill him, someone shouted. Show this human his place, another yelled. But others stayed silent, watching with strange eyes, as if they too were waiting to see what would happen. The girl clutched the human's arm, whispering in panic. You cannot win. Please, leave me. Save yourself. Her voice shook with both fear and desperation. He looked down at her, his eyes steady, his jaw tight. No, he said simply. I don't walk away. The master swung the whip again, but this time the human caught the leather with his bare hand. The sharp edges cut into his skin, blood dripping from his palm, but he pulled hard. The whip snapped loose from the master's grip and fell into the dust. The market froze in silence. The impossible had just happened. No one had ever disarmed the master before, especially not a human. The girl's mouth opened in shock, her eyes wide. The human dropped the whip to the ground, refusing to use it. His voice cut through the silence. You want power? Use your hands, not chains. The master's face turned red with rage. He lunged at the human, his fists swinging. The blow landed hard against the man's jaw, making his head snap to the side. Pain shot through him, but his feet held steady. He spat blood to the ground and raised his eyes again, calm but burning with quiet fury. The girl felt her own body shake as she watched. Why? Why would a human risk his life for her? She could not understand it, but something deep inside her chest felt like it was beating again after years of silence. The master struck again, but the human blocked it with his arm. Another strike came, then another, until both of them stood breathing hard in the dust. The crowd shouted louder and louder, some calling for the human's death, others watching with strange awe. The girl pulled at the human's sleeve, begging, Please, stop! You will die. They will tear you apart. But he did not stop. His hand went to her face again, gently brushing dirt from her cheek. His words were low, only for her. You are worth this. Her throat closed, her heart pounding so loud it drowned out the voices of the crowd. She had never heard anything like it. Not from her master, not from anyone. The master, furious at being defied in front of so many, raised his hand high, calling for the guards. Soldiers began pushing through the crowd, weapons ready. The people stepped back, forming a wide ring around them. The human stood tall, his back straight, his face set. He knew he was outnumbered, but he refused to bow. The girl gripped his arm harder, whispering with tears in her eyes, "They will kill you. You don't even know me. Why are you doing this?" He glanced at her, and for a moment his expression softened. "Because someone should." The words struck her deeper than the whip ever had. She could hardly breathe. For years she had believed she was nothing but property, a slave to be ordered and beaten. But this human, this stranger, had chosen to stand for her when no one else ever had. The guards drew closer. The master pointed at the human, his voice like thunder. "Chain him. Break him in front of all of them. Let every human learn what happens when they forget their place." The crowd shouted louder, pressing forward, waiting for blood. The girl tried to pull away, wanting to save him somehow, but the human gripped her hand tight. His face did not show fear. His voice was low, steady, and filled with fire. "Let them come." The guards rushed in, weapons raised. The crowd roared. The girl screamed his name, though she had only just learned it moments ago. And in the chaos of that moment, one truth became clear to her heart. This human was different. He was not like the rest. He was willing to stand where no one else would. He was willing to burn for her. And as the soldiers closed in, she realized that nothing would ever be the same again. The human was dragged through the dirt by heavy chains. His wrists were tied tight with iron cuffs, and the soldiers kicked him when he slowed. The crowd that had been laughing and cheering only moments ago was now following in silence. Some still mocked him, but others whispered to each other, their voices uneasy. A human had dared to defy the master, and now he was going to pay the price. The alien girl watched helplessly as they pulled him toward the prison cages. Her body trembled with guilt. She had begged him not to interfere, begged him to leave her to her fate, but he hadn't listened. And now, because of her, he was going to die. Her chest felt heavy, as if a stone was pressing down on her heart. The prison was dark and damp, a place that smelled of rust and rot. The guards threw him inside like trash, his body hitting the ground hard. The chains rattled as he moved, his shoulders stiff from the fight. The door slammed shut, the lock echoing like thunder. The guards laughed and walked away, leaving him in the dark. From her hiding place, the girl saw him slump against the wall. His face was bruised, blood dripping from the corner of his mouth, but his eyes were still steady. She pressed her hand against her lips to stop a cry from escaping. She wanted to rush to him, to help him, but the prison was surrounded. Any wrong move, and she would be chained again, or worse. Night fell slowly over the market. The fires dimmed, the crowd scattered, and the guards grew lazy at their posts. The girl waited in the shadows, her heart beating fast. She had stolen a small piece of cloth and a few herbs from the kitchens, hiding them under her torn dress. She didn't know why she was doing it. Maybe it was guilt, maybe it was something else, something she could not yet admit to herself. But she knew she could not leave him alone in the dark. When the guards dozed off, she crept closer. Her bare feet made no sound on the dirt. Her hands shook as she touched the iron bars. Inside, the human opened his eyes. Even in the dim light, she could see the sharpness of his gaze. He did not look surprised to see her. In fact, it seemed like he had been waiting. "You shouldn't be here," he whispered. His voice was rough but steady. Tears burned her eyes. "Because of me, you are in chains. Because of me, you will die tomorrow." The human shifted, pulling his body closer to the bars despite the pain in his shoulders. "Not because of you. Because of them. Because I couldn't watch anymore." She lowered her head, ashamed. "You don't understand. I am nothing. My life is worth less than dirt. Why throw yours away?" He studied her for a moment, his breath slow. Then he said, "You are worth more than you know, and if no one else will see it, then I will." Her chest tightened, and for a moment she could not breathe. No one had ever said such words to her. All her life, she had been told she was worthless, broken, nothing but a slave. Yet this human, beaten and chained, looked at her as if she mattered. She pulled out the cloth and herbs from under her dress. Her fingers slipped through the bars, touching his wounded arm. He winced but did not pull away. Carefully, she pressed the herbs against the cuts, wrapping the cloth around his skin. She tried to focus on the work, but her hands trembled. "Tomorrow," he whispered, his voice almost lost in the night air, "they will send me into the arena. Beasts, weapons. They want me to die slowly." Her eyes widened. She had seen the arena before. It was a place of blood and death, where slaves were thrown to monsters for the crowd's amusement. No human had ever survived it. "You can't fight them," she whispered. "You'll be torn apart." The human gave a small, tired smile. "Maybe, but I won't kneel." She pressed harder on the cloth, her tears falling silently. "Why do you care so much? You don't even know me." He looked at her then, his eyes catching the faint moonlight. "I don't need to know you to see you, and I won't let them take everything from you. Not while I'm still breathing." Her throat tightened, and she covered her mouth to stop a sob. She wanted to tell him to run, to escape, but she knew there was no escape now. The guards would not let him live. Tomorrow, he would step into the arena, and the beasts would tear him apart while the master laughed. Still, something inside her shifted. For the first time in her life, someone had stood for her. Someone had seen her not as dirt, but as a person. She wanted to believe his words, even if they were foolish. She stayed with him as long as she could, whispering soft words, cleaning his wounds, pressing her hand against his through the bars. The night was quiet, broken only by the sound of their breaths. For a little while, the chains seemed lighter and the prison walls less dark. But as dawn began to creep into the sky, she pulled her hand away. "I will pray for you," she whispered, her voice shaking. The human's eyes softened. "Don't pray. Just remember, you are not nothing." Her chest ached as she stepped back into the shadows. The guards were waking, the market coming alive again. Soon they would drag him into the arena. Soon he would face death. She pressed her back against the cold wall, her hands trembling. She told herself she didn't care, that he was just another fool throwing his life away. But deep down, she knew the truth. She cared more than she should. And as the first horn blew, calling for the day's entertainment, she realized something terrifying. She could not bear to watch him die. The horn echoed through the market, sharp and cold, and the crowd began to gather toward the great arena. Dust rose into the sky as thousands of feet rushed to find seats. The smell of sweat, metal, and blood already filled the air. It was the place where slaves and prisoners were sent to die for entertainment. The alien girl stood hidden in the shadows, her hands shaking. She could not stop thinking of the human locked in chains. Today he would face death, and she would be forced to watch. The guards dragged him out of the prison. His wrists and ankles were bound, and his body still carried the bruises from the night before. The people shouted insults at him, calling him weak, laughing that he would not last a single minute against the beasts. Some threw rotten food at him as he was pushed forward. But the human's face stayed calm. His eyes did not look down. He walked steady, as if he had chosen his path and nothing could bend him. The master sat in the highest seat, a golden chair under a canopy, smiling wide. His voice boomed over the noise. "Today you will see what happens when a human forgets his place. Today his blood will feed the sand." The crowd cheered wildly, stamping their feet until the ground shook. The human was shoved into the center of the arena. The chains were unlocked, but not to free him, only to make him fight barehanded. He rubbed his wrists, staring at the gates on the far side. He knew what was coming. The girl hid behind a pillar, close enough to see but far enough to stay unseen. Her heart pounded like a drum. She whispered to herself, "Please survive, please." She had never prayed for anyone before, but now she found herself begging the stars. A loud creak filled the air. The gate rose slowly, the chains rattling. From the darkness inside, a low growl rolled out. The beast stepped into the light, its body massive, its claws sharp as blades. Its yellow eyes locked onto the human, and drool dripped from its jaws. The crowd screamed with joy, chanting for blood. The human did not run. He stood tall, his body tense, his eyes fixed on the beast. Sweat slid down his face, but his feet stayed firm. The beast roared and charged, its body slamming across the sand like thunder. The human moved at the last second, rolling aside. The beast's claws tore into the ground where he had stood. The crowd gasped, then laughed, thinking it was only luck. The girl gripped the pillar so tight her nails dug into the stone. She wanted to close her eyes, but she could not. Every movement he made pulled her deeper into fear and hope. The beast turned again, snapping its jaws. The human grabbed a broken spear that had been left in the sand from a fight before. It was cracked and dull, but it was better than nothing. He held it tight, facing the monster. The beast lunged, its mouth wide. At the last moment, the human shoved the spear into its jaw, twisting with all his strength. The creature howled in rage, tossing its head back and forth. The spear snapped, but the human rolled away again, avoiding death by inches. The crowd roared louder, half of them cheering for the beast, half of them shocked by the human's courage. The master's smile faded slightly. He had expected the fight to end quickly. Instead, the human kept rising, blood on his arms and dust on his face, but fire still burning in his eyes. The girl whispered through tears, "Don't die. Please, don't die." Her voice trembled, her body shaking, as if her own heart was inside the arena with him. The beast roared again and leapt forward, knocking the human down. Its claws slashed across his side, and blood spilled onto the sand. The crowd exploded with noise, some laughing, others crying out. The girl's scream was lost in the chaos. She thought it was over, that he was finished. But slowly, painfully, the human pushed himself up. His body swayed, his hands shaking, yet he did not fall. His eyes glared at the beast with pure defiance. He tore a chain from the ground, wrapping it around his arm. As the beast charged once more, he spun the chain and struck with all his strength. The metal slammed against the beast's head, stunning it. The crowd fell silent in shock. Breathing hard, the human pressed forward, wrapping the chain around the beast's throat. It thrashed wildly, dragging him through the sand, but he held on. His muscles burned, blood poured from his wounds, yet he refused to let go. With a final heave, he twisted the chain tight until the beast collapsed with a heavy crash, its body shaking the ground. For a long moment, silence covered the arena. Everyone stared, unable to believe what they had seen. A human, weak and chained, had brought down a beast meant to tear him apart. The master's face turned pale, his smile gone. The crowd slowly erupted, some in rage, others in awe. Whispers spread fast. A human killed a beast. Impossible. Maybe humans are not so weak after all. The girl's tears fell freely now. Her chest ached, but her lips curved into a trembling smile. He was alive. He had survived. Against every law, against every cruelty, he had shown them something they could not deny. The human stood in the center of the arena, his chest rising and falling with every painful breath. His body was covered in blood, his skin broken, but his eyes looked only at the master. He said nothing, but his gaze was enough. It was a challenge, a promise that he would not be broken. The girl pressed her hand to her heart, her whole body trembling. For the first time in her life, she felt something stronger than fear, hope, but the moment was not safe. She knew the master would never forgive this humiliation. The human had won today, but tomorrow would bring something even worse. As the guards rushed into the arena to seize him again, the crowd shouted louder than ever. Some cheered for the human, others demanded his death. The sand was still wet with blood, the beast lying still, and at the center stood the human, beaten but unbroken. And in that instant, everyone watching knew one thing. This was no ordinary human. This was the beginning of something that they could not yet understand. The guards dragged the human back to his prison cell after the arena fight. His body was torn, his clothes soaked in blood, and every step he took left a mark of red on the ground. The crowd outside still buzzed with noise, half in disbelief, half in anger. Some shouted that it was impossible, others demanded that he be killed at once. But inside the dark cell, the world grew quiet again. The door slammed shut, and the sound of the lock echoed like thunder. The girl waited until night came. She had hidden all day, her mind racing, her heart pounding with every thought of him. She could still see him in the sand, wrapped in chains, dragging the beast down when no one believed he could. That image burned in her chest like fire. She told herself she was a fool for caring, but she could not stop herself. So when the guards grew lazy and the market fell into silence, she crept toward the prison again, carrying what little she had stolen from the kitchens, a jug of water, a handful of herbs, and strips of cloth. He sat against the wall, his body slumped but his eyes still open. Even broken, he looked unyielding. When she slipped close to the bars, he turned his head, a faint smile touching his bruised lips. "You again," he whispered. Her throat tightened. She wanted to scold him, to ask why he had chosen to fight for her, why he had risked his life. But instead, she pushed the water jug through the bars. "Drink," she whispered urgently. "You'll die if you don't." He took the jug, his hands trembling, and drank deeply. Then he leaned back against the wall, breathing hard. "Thank you." She reached through the bars, her small hands trembling as they touched his skin. She began to clean his wounds, pressing herbs against the cuts, wrapping them carefully. Every time he flinched, she whispered, "Sorry, sorry," her voice soft, as if she were afraid the walls themselves would hear. For a while, neither of them spoke. The silence was filled with the sound of water dripping in the dark, the rustle of cloth, and the quiet rhythm of his breathing. But her thoughts were loud inside her head. Finally, she asked, her voice breaking, "Why? Why save me? I am nothing. I am only a slave. You could have walked away." He lifted his head slowly, his eyes meeting hers through the bars. Even in the dark, his gaze felt heavy, like he was carrying a truth too large for words. "Because no one deserves to be treated like that," he said. "Not you. Not anyone." Her heart trembled. She turned her face away, afraid he would see the tears filling her eyes. She had lived her whole life hearing she was worthless, that her only use was to obey. Yet this human, beaten and bleeding, spoke as if her life mattered, as if she was more than the dirt her master forced her to eat from. She pressed her forehead against the bars. Her voice was low, shaking. "If you die tomorrow, what will I do? What was the point of saving me if you throw your life away?" He leaned closer, his face only inches from hers. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Then you live. You carry it forward. Promise me you won't let them break you again." Her breath caught. She wanted to protest, to tell him she couldn't, that she wasn't strong enough. But the way he looked at her left no room for doubt. His eyes burned with a fire she had never seen before, a fire that made her believe, even for a moment, that maybe she could be something more than a slave. Her hands touched his through the bars, her fingers trembling. She whispered back, "Then don't die. Please, don't leave me alone in this place." His hand squeezed hers weakly, his skin rough and warm. "I'll try," he said, his voice strained but steady. "But if they kill me, remember what I said. You are not dirt. You are not nothing." Her tears spilled over, falling silently to the ground. She wanted to stay like that forever, holding his hand through the bars, feeling for the first time in her life that someone saw her as more than property. But the sound of boots broke the silence. Guards were approaching, their voices loud as they joked and laughed, unaware of the quiet exchange happening in the shadows. She pulled her hands back quickly, wiping her eyes. Panic filled her chest. If they found her there, she would be punished, maybe even killed. She gathered the empty jug and cloth quickly, whispering one last word before stepping into the dark. "Tomorrow, I'll find a way." He watched her go, his heart heavy but strangely at peace. Even in chains, even on the edge of death, he felt like he had done something that mattered. He had given her a piece of hope, and in return, she had given him something he hadn't felt in years. Belief that he wasn't alone. The guards passed by, laughing loudly, and the girl slipped deeper into the shadows, her heart racing. She pressed her hand against her chest, as if trying to hold in the storm inside. She told herself she was only helping him out of guilt, but deep down, she knew it was more. She cared for him. She needed him. And if tomorrow the arena demanded his life again, she would not just watch. Back in his cell, the human leaned his head against the wall, closing his eyes. His body was broken, his strength nearly gone, but his spirit remained unbroken. He could still feel the warmth of her hand on his, still hear the trembling in her voice. And though he knew tomorrow might be his last day, a small smile touched his lips. Because for the first time since he had been dragged into this cruel world, he had found a reason to keep fighting. A promise whispered in the dark, fragile but powerful, a bond born not from chains but from choice. And somewhere in the shadows, the girl whispered to herself again and again, as if repeating it would make it real. "You are not nothing." The night was heavy with smoke and noise. The market had turned into chaos after the arena fight, and people were still shouting in anger and disbelief. The master's face had been humiliated in front of his people, and his rage spilled into every corner of the city. Soldiers marched through the streets, striking anyone who stood in their way, their voices sharp as they searched for order. But in that chaos, something else was moving, something far more dangerous for the master. The girl crouched in the shadows, her hands shaking as she clutched a stolen key. Her heart hammered in her chest so loudly, she thought the guards would hear it. All night she had been planning, thinking, and praying for courage. She had made a choice. If she did nothing, The human would be dragged into the arena again until he died. If she tried, maybe there was a chance. She whispered to herself again and again, "He saved me. Now I must save him." The prison was guarded by soldiers, but tonight the air was different. The city was restless, riots flickering in small corners where whispers of rebellion had begun. Many had seen the human defeat the beast, and it had shaken their belief that humans were weak. That fear worked in her favor. The guards were distracted, moving quickly from one crowd to another, trying to stamp out sparks of defiance before they became fire. She moved carefully, her body close to the ground. When she reached the back of the prison, her fingers gripped the iron bars. Inside, she saw him again. He sat against the wall, his head lowered, but when he heard the faint scrape of the lock, his eyes lifted. They widened when he saw her. "You shouldn't be here," he whispered, his voice weak but steady. Her breath trembled. "I'm not leaving you to die," she said. "Not after what you did for me." The lock clicked, and the door creaked open. She slipped inside quickly, rushing to his side. His body was weaker than before, covered in bandages she had tied the night before, but he still managed a faint smile. "You're going to get yourself killed," he muttered, shaking his head. She pulled his arm over her shoulder, her small frame straining under his weight. "Then we die together," she whispered back. The door swung wide, and the night air hit them. The smell of fire was stronger now, smoke rising from the edge of the city. Shouts echoed from all sides, boots pounding against the ground. They moved as fast as they could through the shadows, ducking behind walls whenever torches flickered too close. But the master was not blind. From his high seat, he had seen the guards whispering, seen the unrest spreading, and now he wanted to crush it all. His voice boomed from the tower, carried by speakers across the streets. "Find them. Bring me the human and the girl, alive or dead. It makes no difference." The girl's legs shook as they ran. Every corner felt like a trap, every shadow a hunter, but she refused to stop. The human's breath grew heavy, his body leaning harder against her. Twice he stumbled, nearly falling, but each time she pulled him back, whispering, "Just a little further, don't give up." They reached a street filled with flames. A riot had broken out, and people were shouting, throwing stones at the soldiers. Fire leapt from carts and stalls, spreading smoke that burned their eyes. In the chaos, no one noticed the girl, and the humans slipped through the crowd. They moved with the smoke, hiding in the storm, but the master's soldiers were everywhere. Soon, a horn sounded, and the clash of metal rang out. A group of armed guards spotted them, shouting, "There! Stop them!" The girl froze, her heart jumping into her throat. The soldiers rushed forward with blades and chains. The human pushed her behind him, even though his body was weak. His eyes burned, his voice a growl. "Run! I'll hold them." "No," she cried, clutching his arm. "I won't leave you." The soldiers charged, and the first swung his weapon. The human grabbed a broken piece of wood from the ground, using it like a club. The strike shook his whole body, but he did not fall. Another soldier attacked, and he blocked again, gritting his teeth against the pain. The girl screamed, grabbing stones from the ground and throwing them at the soldiers with all her strength. One hit a guard's helmet, stunning him for a moment. Her voice cracked as she shouted, "Leave him alone." But the guards kept pressing, their numbers too many. Just as the human began to stumble, the air erupted with fire. A nearby wagon exploded, scattering the soldiers. The flames lit the night, and smoke swallowed everything. "Now!" the girl shouted, pulling his hand. Together they ran, their lungs burning from the smoke, their feet slipping on the broken stones. Behind them, the master's voice screamed through the speakers, full of fury. "Bring me my property. No one escapes me." They stumbled through an alley until they reached the city's edge. The walls loomed high, sharp and unbroken. Soldiers were closing in from every direction, their torches flickering like angry stars. The girl's chest tightened in despair. There was nowhere left to run. The human, breathing hard, pushed her behind him again. His face was pale, blood dripping down his side, but his voice was firm. "Stay back. If they want you, they'll have to go through me." Tears streamed down her cheeks. She shook her head violently. "No, not again. I won't let you die for me." The soldiers surrounded them, swords drawn, their laughter cruel. The master's order echoed again. "Seize them!" The girl's heart pounded so loud she thought it would burst. She grabbed the human's hand tight, whispering desperately, "Please, Don't let go. Not now. The circle of soldiers closed in. Flames burned in the distance, smoke painted the sky black, and the whole city seemed to tremble. The human straightened, his body weak but his spirit unbroken. His eyes scanned the soldiers, and his jaw tightened. The girl's breath caught as he squeezed her hand. He whispered one final promise, his voice steady despite the storm around them. We fight together. And as the soldiers stepped forward, the night exploded with fire, steel, and the sound of two souls refusing to bow. The soldiers closed in with their blades shining in the firelight. The girl held the human's hand so tightly her knuckles turned white. She could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. Around them, the crowd had gathered, curious and eager to see blood. Many had come to watch the master's orders carried out, but some in the shadows whispered quietly to each other. They had seen the human fight the beast in the arena. They had seen him bleed, but still stand. A few of them wondered if maybe, just maybe, he was something more than they had been told. The master himself arrived, carried high on a platform by his guards. His eyes burned with fury. His voice boomed like thunder. Enough of this! End him! End them both! The crowd roared, some chanting for death, others silent and tense. The human stood tall, even though his body trembled from pain. Blood ran down his side, and his arms shook, but his eyes were steady. He looked at the girl, who was shaking, her face pale with fear. He whispered, "Stay behind me." She shook her head fiercely, tears spilling down her cheeks. "No, not this time. We fight together." Her voice was small, but filled with a strange strength. The first soldier rushed forward, blade raised high. The human stepped forward, blocking the strike with a broken piece of chain still wrapped around his arm. The clash rang out like a bell. He twisted, forcing the soldier back. Another came from the side, but the girl, desperate and wild, grabbed a burning stick from the ground and swung it with all her strength. The soldier staggered back, shocked that a weak slave dared to fight. The crowd gasped. A ripple of surprise moved through them. For the first time, they saw the girl not crawling in the dirt, but standing tall with fire in her hands. The master's face twisted in rage. "Kill them!" he screamed again. But something was changing. Whispers turned into shouts. A few voices rose from the crowd. "Enough!" one alien shouted. Another voice joined, then another. "No more slaves! She is not an animal!" The soldiers hesitated for a moment, their eyes flicking toward the crowd. The human's chest heaved as he faced the line of enemies. His voice cut through the noise. "You call her dirt, but look at her. She stands braver than any of you. Is this what you call strength? Beating the weak, chaining the innocent?" The crowd stirred even louder. Some shouted in agreement, some in anger, but the seed of doubt grew stronger. The master's command no longer rang as sharp as before. The soldiers moved again, forcing the human back. His knees threatened to give, but the girl grabbed his arm and helped him stand. "You're not alone," she whispered. "I won't let you fall." Suddenly, a stone flew from the crowd and struck a soldier's helmet. Then another. People were rising from their seats, some throwing rocks, some shouting for the fight to stop. The master's voice cracked with fury as he tried to shout them down, but the voices only grew louder. The human, covered in blood, raised his hand, his voice raw but unbroken. "You can chain me, you can break me, but you will never silence me, and you will never break her again." The girl's tears shone in the firelight. She felt her chest burst with something she had never known: pride, hope, and strength. The man who had been thrown into chains for her was now turning the whole crowd against their master. The soldiers faltered. Some lowered their weapons, unsure if they should fight against the will of the people. Others looked to the master, waiting for his command. But the master, red with rage, could only scream. His power was slipping, and he knew it. Then, with a sudden cry, a group from the crowd rushed forward, attacking the soldiers. Chaos erupted. The human pulled the girl close, shielding her as the battle spread. Smoke and fire filled the air, but through it all, one truth rang clear. The master's reign of fear was breaking. The girl clung to the human as they pushed through the madness. Strangers stepped in front of them, blocking attacks, shouting, "Go! Get them out!" For the first time in her life, others were defending her instead of mocking her. The chain of shame she had carried for so long began to crack. Together, they fought their way through the flames until they reached the open road outside the city. Behind them, the sound of rebellion roared. The master's screams echoed faintly, but his power was no longer absolute. The girl fell to her knees, shaking, her lungs burning with smoke. The human dropped beside her, his body weak, his wounds deep. For a moment, neither spoke. They just breathed, alive, against all odds. Finally, she turned to him, her face streaked with tears and ash. "You didn't just save me," she whispered. Her voice was soft but full of weight. "You gave me back my life." He looked at her, his eyes heavy with exhaustion but filled with something steady. "No," he said, "you saved yourself. You just needed someone to remind you who you are." Her lips trembled. She wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, that without him she would still be on her knees eating from the dirt. But instead she leaned against him, her head on his shoulder, and let herself believe his words. The night sky stretched above them, black and endless, but for the first time it did not feel empty. The fire of the city glowed behind them, and ahead lay only uncertainty. But the girl did not fear it anymore. With him beside her, the unknown felt like freedom. Voices still echoed from the city, voices of people rising after so many years of silence. And in those voices, she heard the truth. The master had lost. The chains had been broken, not just for her, but for all who had been forced to crawl in the dirt. The human leaned back, his breath ragged, his body close to collapse. But his hand found hers again, warm and steady. She gripped it tight, her tears falling silently, not from pain this time, but from a strange new joy. And as the dawn began to rise, painting the sky with the first light of day, she whispered the words that had once been unthinkable. "I am not nothing." The human smiled faintly, his eyes closing as exhaustion pulled him toward sleep. "No," he whispered back. "You never were." The girl pressed her forehead against his shoulder, holding him close as the world changed around them. The nightmare was ending, and a new beginning had come, one born from defiance, from courage, and from the unbreakable bond between a broken slave and the human who refused to let her stay broken.